The cafe was louder than usual that night, filled with the soft clatter of cups and the blended hum of a dozen conversations. Fairy lights hung from the ceiling like tiny warm stars, but none of that warmth reached me. I sat at a small round table near the window, trying to keep the wheels of my chair hidden under the wooden edge. I adjusted my scarf, tugged the sleeves of my sweater down, pretended I was simply cold and not trying to hide the shaking of my hands. I kept reminding myself to breathe. I reminded myself that this would be fine. The date was supposed to be casual and low pressure. That is what my old friends told me. Just coffee. Just conversation. Nothing scary. Nothing to fear. But when I caught sight of those same friends sitting at a table across the room, huddled together with iced lattes and smug little smiles, something twisted in my stomach. They were whispering and glancing at me. Their phones were pointed slightly in my direction. At first, I tried to pretend it was coincidence. Maybe they were scrolling, maybe they were texting, but then I heard it. The faint sound of a camera shutter. My heart thudded against my ribs. I should have left. I knew it. But the part of me that wanted to believe in second chances made me stay. I had taken longer getting ready tonight than I had in months. Soft makeup, brushed hair, a blouse I had not worn since before the accident. I wanted to feel like myself again. A version of myself that still felt possible. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and in walked a man who did not look like he belonged in this little old cafe at all. Daniel Hayes. I recognized him immediately, even though he had no entourage, no assistant, no polished veneer announcing his success. He wore a simple charcoal coat, dark sweater, clean lines, but nothing showy. He moved with a kind of quiet confidence that made people look twice without knowing why. He scanned the room, not hurried, not arrogant, just thoughtful, as if searching for someone whose face he had memorized only through descriptions. Then his gaze settled on me. I felt my throat tighten. This was the moment my so-called friends were waiting for. The moment the powerful CEO would see the girl in a wheelchair and turn around in disappointment. I could almost feel their anticipation from across the cafe. I braced myself for the sting of rejection, for the awkward pause, for the polite excuse. But Daniel stepped forward. He walked straight to my table, and instead of hesitation, instead of shock or pity, or that quick glance away that people sometimes do when they do not know how to react, he smiled. A real smile, calm, warm, present. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down as if nothing about this moment was strange at all. "Emily," he said gently. I nodded, stunned. "Yes. You are Daniel." "I am." His voice was smooth, but not practiced. He looked at the table, then back at me. "Is this spot comfortable for you? We can move to a different table if it gives you more space." The question hit me unexpectedly. Not because it was kind, but because of the way he said it. No pity, no exaggerated sympathy. Just respect. Simple and human. Something in my chest loosened. I shook my head softly. "This is fine. Thank you." From across the room, I heard a whisper. "He is staying." "Why is he staying?" Another voice laughed quietly as if disappointed that their prediction was failing. I lowered my eyes, embarrassed for reasons I could not name. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "I hope I did not keep you waiting too long." I swallowed. "You are right on time." I tried to sound casual, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. The conversation flowed more smoothly than I expected. He asked about the book I had on the table. I asked about the tiny pin on his coat. He talked about architecture with a kind of understated passion that made the subject sound beautiful even to someone like me, someone who knew nothing about buildings. I found myself relaxing my hands, slowly unclenching around my cup. I even managed to smile. It was almost easy to forget the eyes watching from across the cafe. But then a sharp click pierced the air. I froze. Daniel noticed immediately. He turned slow and subtle toward the sound. My friends whipped their phones down too late. Their faces stiffened. His eyes narrowed just slightly. Not anger, not confusion, recognition. He understood. And that was the moment I realized fully painfully that I had been set up. This entire date had been arranged, not to help me, not to support me, but to humiliate me. To record my reaction, to capture the moment he would walk away. My cheeks burned with shame. I could not breathe. I muttered something about needing fresh air, fumbled for my bag, and wheeled toward the door before he could stop me. Outside, the night was cold and sharp. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. I moved quickly down the sidewalk, desperate to disappear before the tears reached my voice. I thought the worst was behind me. I thought leaving would end the humiliation, but as I reached the corner, my phone buzzed with a notification, a video upload alert. I did not open it. I did not need to. Somewhere behind me, my friends were laughing, and I did not yet know that the world would soon be laughing with them. I woke the next morning expecting a quiet day, maybe a slow breakfast, maybe the lingering warmth of a conversation that had surprised me more than anything had in months. Instead, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. It buzzed so hard it rattled against the wood over and over until the noise pulled me from sleep. I frowned, still groggy, and reached for it. There were more notifications than I had ever seen in my life. Mentions, messages, unread texts from numbers I did not recognize, a link someone had forwarded with no explanation. The hairs on my arms rose before I even tapped the screen. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I opened the link, and there I was, on a TikTok video already climbing in views. The shaky footage filmed from across the cafe caught everything, me sitting nervously at the table, tucking my hair behind my ear again and again, trying to look composed while hiding the wheels of my chair. Then Daniel walking in, confident, calm, well-dressed, a CEO in every sense. The caption in bold neon letters read, CEO, tricked into blind date with wheelchair girl. My breath caught in my throat, my stomach rolled. The video zoomed in on me, then cut to the moment Daniel pulled out his chair and sat down, but the audio had been edited so that laughter echoed under it. Cruel, sharp laughter. Comments were already flooding in. Pity date. Classic. Bet she plays the disability card for views. Imagine showing up to that. I'd walk out too. Bro is too polite. I would have dipped. And worse. So much worse. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. My vision blurred. I could not breathe. I clicked out of the app, but the notifications kept coming. Texts, messages. People I had not spoken to in years sending me screenshots. My chest tightened, a slow, crushing pressure that made every inhale feel thin. I opened my laptop hoping that maybe the comments on other platforms were not as cruel, that maybe TikTok was the worst of it. I was wrong. The video was everywhere. Reposted, stitched, duetted. Some people mocked me. Some mocked Daniel. Some mocked both of us. Wheelchair girl thinking she can pull a CEO is wild. This is staged. No guy like him would sit. She looks like she's trying way too hard. Imagine being her. I'd delete my existence. My hands flew to my mouth, but the sound that escaped me was not a scream. It was a small, broken exhale. My heart felt like it was collapsing from the inside. I slammed the laptop shut so quickly it shook the desk. I rolled backward, almost hitting the dresser. The room seemed too small, too tight, like the walls were folding in. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the shaking, but every time I blinked, I saw the cruel words again and again. I was not just humiliated, I was exposed, used, turned into a spectacle. Someone knocked on my door. My mother's gentle voice came from the hallway. "Honey, are you awake?" I swallowed hard. I forced my voice to sound steady. "I am fine, Mom. Just tired." I waited until her footsteps faded before letting my shoulders cave. I curled forward, pressing my forehead against my knees. Not fine. Not even close. My phone vibrated again. Another notification. Then another. Then another. I turned it off, shoved it under a pillow, and wheeled myself into the bathroom. I stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, my face pale. I didn't look like me. I didn't look like anyone. I closed the mirror cabinet just so I wouldn't have to see my reflection anymore. For the rest of the morning, I stayed in my room with the lights off. I did not eat. I did not drink. I did not even cry after a while. I just felt numb, like my body had detached from itself. Hours later, I heard my mother knock again. I ignored it, hugging myself tighter. The world outside continued mocking me. I could almost hear it through the walls. Somewhere across the city, Daniel was in a meeting completely unaware of the storm that had erupted online, but that changed quickly. I learned later that it was his assistant who brought it up casually. "Hey, have you seen that video that's blowing up?" He asked her what video. She showed him. I imagined the silent way he watched it. I imagined the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes hardened in quiet anger. Not loud or dramatic, but cold, controlled, the kind that comes from someone who has dealt with cruelty before. He didn't slam the laptop shut. He didn't call PR. He didn't demand to know who caused it. Instead, he opened LinkedIn. He typed slowly, carefully, paused, deleted, rewrote, and then he posted something that would change everything. "Yesterday, I went on a date. I met someone who reminded me that people can be brave in ways the world doesn't see. If you think someone's vulnerability makes them a joke, the joke is on you. Stop using people's pain as entertainment." Daniel Hayes. It spread fast, faster than the TikTok. People began resharing it, commenting, apologizing. Some of the same people who laughed at me the night before returned to say they were wrong. But I didn't see any of that. All I saw were the hateful comments echoing in my mind. Late that evening, after nearly a full day of silence, my email pinged. I opened it with trembling hands. From Daniel, subject: "You did nothing wrong." Message: "If you need space, I understand. If you need someone to sit quietly nearby, I'm here. You did nothing wrong." I stared at the words through blurry vision. Someone somewhere in this world did not walk away from me, but I was too broken to believe it. I did not answer Daniel's email. I couldn't. My chest still felt like someone had reached inside and squeezed it tight until it bruised. Every time I tried to type even a single word, my vision blurred and my throat closed. So I did nothing. I stayed quiet. I hid. And yet, the next morning when I unlocked my phone only long enough to check the time, there it was. A single email from him. No subject. Just a picture of a small pink flower sprouting through a crack in the sidewalk. Beneath it, one line: "Some things find a way to grow anyway." I closed the email immediately. I didn't reply, but I read it again later, and later again. The morning after that, another email arrived. This time, a photo of a clumsy golden retriever with its entire head shoved into a bush. The caption said, "He sneezed himself into a fountain after this. Thought you might appreciate the drama." I stared at the screen for nearly a minute before a tiny, unwilling smile touched my lips. I didn't reply, but I kept the picture. Then, a day later, another image. A cup of coffee with a crooked foam heart. "This barista tried," he wrote. "Effort deserves respect." It wasn't the heavy encouragement people liked to give, not toxic positivity, not demands that I cheer up, just presence. Quiet, steady, patient presence. The kind no one had ever given me before. I didn't know how to accept it, so I avoided responding. But every day I waited to see what would show up next in my inbox. I hated that I waited. I loved that I waited. I hated that I loved it. On the fourth day, something different happened. My printer jammed. A project I needed printed for a returning customer stopped mid-page, ink streaking everywhere. I had never hated a piece of machinery more. Frustrated, tired, overwhelmed, I finally broke silence and sent Daniel a short message. "Printer is dead. Do you know how to fix it?" I regretted it the second I hit send. I didn't want to need anything. I didn't want to be someone he rescued. I didn't want to open the door to disappointment. But 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. I froze. I didn't order anything. I didn't expect anyone. Slowly, I wheeled myself to the front door and peeked through the side window. No Daniel. No person at all. Just a brown paper bag wrapped in waterproof plastic. I hesitated before unlocking the door and leaning forward to pick it up. Inside the bag was my printed document. Crisp. Perfect. No streaks. No errors. Under it, a second wrapped item. Lemon loaf cake. Still warm. A small sticky note rested on top. "Guessing you forgot to eat while fixing the printer. If I'm wrong, eat it anyway. My hand went to my mouth. My eyes stung. He had driven all the way across town just to drop it off. And he didn't knock. He didn't wait for thanks. He didn't force conversation. He just left it. So quiet. So gentle. So unlike the world that had mocked me for days. I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I laughed. Soft, shaky, but real. I took one bite of the lemon loaf and immediately burst into more laughter because it was too warm, too bright, too sweet compared to everything that had happened. And then I cried. Because something in me, something bruised so badly, felt a tiny piece shift, not healed, not fixed, just moved a little. That night I wrote him back, only a few words. Thank you for not walking away. 10 minutes later, his response arrived. That's not something I know how to do. And somehow that one line stayed in my head long after I went to bed. 2 days later, he emailed again. A picture of a fountain reflecting early morning light. Looks like you, he wrote. Soft but steady. I stared at it for almost an hour, unsure how to process the fact that someone saw steadiness in me when all I had seen in myself was shaking. That afternoon, a customer ordered a special batch of candles, and I found myself reaching for my supplies without thinking. The rhythm felt unfamiliar at first, like touching an old piano after years away. My hands weren't steady, but they were trying, and that was enough to start. In the evening, as I poured wax into jars, I felt the faintest sense of normalcy settling into my chest. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message from Daniel. Trying a new hobby today. It's terrible, he wrote. A photo followed. A crooked pottery mug. Lopsided. Cracked. Genuinely awful. I snorted so loudly I scared myself. Another message came right after. It is looking at me with judgment. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle the laugh that escaped, and for the first time since the viral humiliation, the laugh didn't feel wrong. It felt like it belonged. It felt like a small breath of air after being underwater too long. Later that night, I sat in bed and reread all his messages from the week. All the pictures. All the small gentle things. He didn't demand my attention. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't ask me to heal on his timeline. He just stayed, quietly. And quietly was exactly how I needed someone to show up. The next morning, as I opened my email, I realized something else. Somewhere in the past few days, the crushing silence inside me had shifted into something softer. Maybe not hope, not yet, but not despair either. Something in between. Something that felt like a beginning. I didn't expect to say yes. Not after the week I had. Not after the humiliation, the viral cruelty, the sleepless nights, and the fragile quiet. I was slowly stitching together piece by piece. But when Daniel sent an email that morning saying he would be at the Maplewood Park around 9, just reading on a bench near the walking path, and that I was welcome to come if I felt like being near someone who wouldn't ask questions, something inside me stirred. He didn't ask me to talk. He didn't ask me to meet him. He simply offered space, not pressure. And maybe that was why a little after 9:30, I found myself wheeling slowly along the path toward the maple tree he mentioned. The air was cool. The sunlight filtered through leaves just beginning to turn gold. Birds hopped across the grass, pecking curiously at the ground. It smelled like damp earth and the tail end of summer. I spotted him from a distance. He sat alone on a wooden bench, one ankle crossed over his knee, holding a paperback book in one hand, but not really reading. His phone rested beside him untouched. He wasn't scanning the park or looking around for me. It was as if he meant exactly what he said. Come if you want. Don't if you can't. The choice is yours. I stopped my wheelchair several yards away, unsure if I should move closer. But then he lifted his head, almost sensing movement, and when he saw me, he didn't wave or stand or rush toward me. He simply offered a small, calm smile, the kind that acknowledged my presence without overwhelming it. I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. I rolled to a bench a few meters from him and parked facing the pond. Not next to him, not too close, but close enough that I wasn't alone. We sat like that for several minutes, listening to the soft splash of ducks landing on the water. He didn't say anything, and that silence wasn't heavy. It was warm. Considering everything inside me had been loud and chaotic for days, that quiet felt like a blanket settling around my shoulders. After what felt like a long moment, he finally spoke, still looking at the pond. "The water's calmer today," he said. "Last week it was choppy." I nodded, thankful he didn't launch into anything deep. "I like it like this," I whispered. He gave a small hum of agreement. "Feels easier to breathe." Another silence followed, not awkward, but steady grounding. A child laughed in the distance somewhere behind us near the playground. A breeze moved through the trees, brushing against my skin. For a second, I felt normal. Or something close to it. I surprised myself when I spoke again. I thought the comments would stop by now. He lowered his book, his expression thoughtful instead of pitying. "People online don't get tired of being cruel," he said softly. "But cruelty doesn't mean truth." My hands tightened slightly on my wheels. "It still hurt." "I know," he replied. "You deserved better than what they did." My throat tightened. "Why did you defend me?" He shifted, turning slightly so he was more angled toward me but still giving me space. "Because what happened was wrong," he said simply. "And because I meant what I said." "You didn't do anything wrong." I looked down at my hands. It didn't feel like that. He hesitated, then said, "Pain lies to us sometimes, especially when it echoes old wounds." I didn't know how he always managed to say things that landed exactly where the bruise was deepest. I didn't respond. Instead, I looked back at the pond, watched the ripples. Another few minutes passed before he asked quietly, "Would you like to tell me anything today? Or would you rather just sit?" I could have said no. I almost did. But maybe the quiet between us had loosened something in me. "I used to come here a lot before the accident," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I used to run. I loved it. Running made me feel free, like my body belonged to me." He listened without interrupting. "And after the accident," I continued, "I couldn't come back for a long time. I didn't want to remember what I lost." "But you're here now," he said gently. "That's not nothing." My breath shook. "I don't feel brave." "You don't have to feel brave to do something brave," he replied. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that settle. It felt like the first time in a long while that someone wasn't trying to push me into positivity. He was just naming the truth. Slowly, I opened my eyes and let myself look at him fully. The early sunlight touched the edges of his hair, warm and soft. His posture was relaxed, but aware, as if he was ready to step in if I needed help, but not assuming I did. "I missed talking to you," I admitted quietly. He looked at me for a long second, something softening in his eyes. "I missed hearing your voice." A warmth flooded somewhere beneath my ribs. I wasn't used to someone wanting my presence without expecting anything from me. He glanced toward the path ahead. "If you want," he said, "we can circle the pond together. You set the pace." I hesitated. Moving through public spaces still scared me. The stares, the whispers, the invisible weight of being seen. "No pressure," he added. "We can stay right here." I surprised myself again. "Let's try." He stood up slowly, not making any dramatic gestures, and walked beside me at my pace as I rolled forward. We moved around the pond together, the world quiet except for rustling leaves and distant voices. At one point, he asked, "Does this feel okay?" I nodded. "It does. Then we'll stop whenever you want." We walked in comfortable silence, something blooming gently in the space between us. When we returned to the bench, I felt lighter. Not healed, not fixed, but less weighed down. As the breeze brushed my cheek, I whispered mostly to myself, "Maybe we can do this again." His smile was soft, warm, and real. Any time. In that moment, I felt the first small shift inside me. Not hope, not love. Just possibility. I should have known peace never stayed long in my life. The park had given me one quiet morning, one breath of something almost like hope. But life has a way of reminding you exactly where your wounds are the moment you start to forget them. It happened 3 days later. I was in my small living room packaging the last few candle orders I still had before everything slowed down. My mother was in the kitchen humming softly while washing dishes, a sound that always calmed me. For one fragile moment, the world felt manageable. Then my phone buzzed once, then again, then over and over like a siren. I ignored it at first, thinking it was leftover notifications from the hateful video fiasco earlier. But when the buzzing turned into a non-stop chain of dings and alerts, something cold slid down my spine. I finally picked it up. At the top was a message from an old high school acquaintance. Then another. Then another. All different people, but all saying the same thing. Are you okay? This is awful. Emily, have you seen what he posted? My blood went cold. I clicked the link. And there it was. A photo from years ago, before the accident, before the wheelchair, before the surgery. Scars before the sleepless nights and the trembling hands. I was standing on a track field in running shorts and a tank top, bright sunlight hitting my face as I laughed with my teammates. Healthy, strong, upright, alive. The caption above it made my breath stop. Guess the wheelchair girl wasn't so helpless after all. She's been playing the pity card for years. Fraud always gets exposed. The account that posted it belonged to the boy who once said he loved me, the same boy behind the wheel the night everything ended. He disappeared after the crash vanished from my life, and I foolishly thought I'd escaped him for good. But he came back not with remorse, not with guilt, but with venom twisting the knife he had put in me years ago. Within minutes, the post spread. People cropped the image, reposted it, added their own captions. So she can walk. Wow, the Disability Act is next level. Scammer alert. Anything for sympathy these days. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else. I dropped the phone onto the carpet, my fingers numb. It felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. My mother called from the kitchen, but I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. I had known pain before. I had known humiliation. But this was different. This was someone rewriting my truth and handing it to the world like a weapon. Orders from my little online shop started canceling one by one. Notification after notification. Please refund. I don't support scammers. You should be ashamed. My hands shook uncontrollably. I pressed them to my legs, trying to steady them, but my whole body trembled as if I were freezing. My mother walked into the living room, wiping her hands with a towel, and saw my face. "Emily," she said softly, kneeling beside my wheelchair. "What happened?" I couldn't form words. I just pointed at the phone. She picked it up, her eyes scanning the screen. Her breath caught. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice quivered, but she stayed calm, for me, always stronger for me than for herself. "None of this is true," she whispered, brushing my hair gently behind my ear. People forget that a picture freezes only one moment, not the ones after it, not the pain, not the surgery, not the wheel. I cried silently, my tears dropping onto my lap. "Mom," I choked out, "they think I lied. They think I did this for attention." She cupped my cheeks. "The people who know your heart don't need proof. The people who judge you don't deserve proof. But logic doesn't hold against cruelty. Cruelty wins too easily." My mother sighed heavily. "I'll make us tea," she said softly, her hand lingering on my shoulder before she stood and walked toward the kitchen. She was halfway there when she suddenly grabbed the counter, her knuckles turning white. "Mom," I whispered. She pressed a hand to her chest. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice faltered. She tried to inhale deeply. Her breath stuttered. Everything inside me dropped. "Mom." She didn't answer. She collapsed. Her body hit the floor with a sound that still echoes in my nightmares. "Mom." I tried to wheel toward her, but panic made my arms clumsy. I called 911 with shaking hands, my voice barely coherent. Paramedics arrived quickly, lifting her, carefully checking vitals, asking questions I struggled to answer. Possible cardiac episode 1 murmured, "We need to go." I followed the ambulance in a rideshare car, my heart pounding so hard, my vision blurred. The hospital lights were too bright, too white, too cold. They admitted her immediately. I sat in the waiting room, gripping the armrests so hard my hands hurt. Hours passed in fragments. A doctor finally approached me. "Your mother had an acute cardiac event," he said gently. "She is stable for now, but we need to run more tests. Stress can worsen these conditions." Has she been under emotional strain recently? I felt the question like a blade. Yes, because of me. Because of everything happening to me. I nodded silently. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder before walking away. I stared at the blank wall in front of me. My throat felt raw. My chest felt hollow. My heart felt broken in too many places to count. The world outside didn't stop. My phone kept vibrating with more notifications, more comments, more cancellations, more people deciding who I was based on a photo taken in another lifetime. I turned the phone face down on the waiting room chair. Then I pressed both hands to my face and whispered into them, I tried so hard. I tried to be better. Why does life keep dragging me back? I didn't know it yet, but Daniel would walk into that hospital soon, and everything would change again. For now, all I had was the quiet hum of machines, the sterile smell of hospital air, and the weight of a world falling apart faster than I could hold it. I thought the worst was behind me, that the humiliation from the cafe and the viral clip had been the bottom of the pit, that nothing could cut deeper than watching strangers laugh at my vulnerability. But life has a way of waiting for the exact moment when your shoulders loosen, when your guard softens, when you start to believe maybe you deserve quiet again. And then it strikes with a cruelty so precise, it almost feels personal. It happened early on a Wednesday morning. I was wrapping the last few lavender candles on my dining table, trying to focus on the simple motions of work just to keep my mind steady. My mother was in the kitchen humming while slicing apples, the softest domestic sound in the world, the kind that made our little apartment feel warm, even on the coldest days. For a fleeting moment, I felt normal, steady, anchored. Then my phone began buzzing. Once, twice then, in a frantic chain of notifications so fast the screen lit up like a strobe. I ignored it at first, assuming it was leftover noise from the earlier viral mess. But then I saw the preview of a message pop up. Emily, don't check Instagram. My stomach dropped instantly. Another message, I'm so sorry this is happening again. Then another, are you okay? Please tell me you're okay. My fingers felt clumsy as I unlocked the phone. At the top was a link sent by 5 different people in under a minute. My heart pounded in my ears as I tapped it, and then the world tilted. It was a photo of me, a photo from my life before the accident, before the surgeries, before the wheelchair. I was standing on a track field, legs, strong hair in a ponytail, laughing with my teammates on a spring afternoon. Sunlight on my face, my body straight and whole. The caption above it made my breath catch in my throat so hard it hurt. Guess the wheelchair act doesn't last forever. She's been faking it for sympathy. Scammer always gets caught eventually. Posted by the last person I ever expected to see again. The boy who once told me he loved me. The boy who vanished after the crash. The boy who was behind the wheel that night. I stared at his username, my vision blurring, my pulse hammering through my chest. Why now? Why this? The comments under the post were already piling up, each one a punch to the gut. So she can walk. Fraud alert. Manipulating people with disabilities is the new trend, huh? Imagine pretending to be disabled to sell candles. Get a job instead of lying. I covered my mouth as something inside me cracked open in a way I hadn't felt since the accident itself. It felt like being stripped naked in the middle of a stadium, thousands of eyes watching, judging, pointing. My hands shook so violently I dropped the phone to the floor. My mother turned from the kitchen at the sound. Emily, she asked gently. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She walked over, wiped her hands on her apron, and picked up my phone. Her eyes scanned the screen and her face paled. She sat beside me and held the phone tightly, her fingers trembling. Oh, sweetheart, she whispered, voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Tears spilled down my cheeks silently. They think I lied. I choked. They think I made all of this up. They think I'm pretending. My mother gently cupped my face. People who want to hate will always find a reason. The truth doesn't matter to them, but we know your truth. I shook my head, my whole body trembling. Mom, they're tearing down the shop. Look, I opened my shop dashboard. Dozens of cancellations. Harsh refund requests, ratings dropping with each refresh. Comments calling me a fraud, a thief, a manipulator. My chest constricted so tightly I struggled to breathe. I felt my mother's hand squeezing mine steady but shaking. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, though her voice quivered. She stood up to get me water, but halfway to the kitchen counter she paused, her hand pressed to her chest. "Mom," I whispered. She tried to inhale, but her breath faltered shallow and sharp. "I'm fine," she murmured, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her. She took another step, then her knees buckled. She collapsed hard onto the floor. "Mom!" I screamed, the sound tearing through my throat. I tried to wheel toward her, but panic made my arms slip against the wheels. My hands fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911 through tears and breathless gasps. The paramedics arrived quickly, lifting her onto the stretcher while asking questions I struggled to answer. "Possible cardiac event," one of them said. "We need to move fast." I followed them to the hospital in the back of a taxi, my fingers knotted together, my chest burning with guilt and terror. Neons flashed past the windows in streaks of light, but it all felt distant, unreal, like I was trapped underwater. At the hospital, they rushed her into a treatment room while I sat in the waiting area staring at the floor tiles because looking anywhere else hurt too much. The doctor came out eventually. "Your mother had an acute cardiac episode," he said gently. "She's stable for now, but we'll need more tests. Has she been under heavy emotional strain recently?" I swallowed hard. "Yes," I whispered. "Because of me. Because of everything happening to me." When he left, I curled forward in my wheelchair and pressed my palms into my face, shaking violently. My phone buzzed again, with more comments, more notifications, more strangers debating whether I was a liar or a fraud. I flipped the phone over so the screen faced the chair. Then I whispered into my trembling hands, I tried so hard. Why does life keep dragging me back? I didn't know it yet, but someone else had seen the video too. And he was already looking for me. I barely slept that night. I sat in the dim hospital room with its humming machine's metallic smell and the faint beeping from my mother's monitor, watching her chest rise and fall under thin hospital sheets. She looked so small, smaller than I had ever seen her, like the weight of my world had finally pressed too hard on her heart. I held her hand with both of mine, my fingers cold and stiff, and whispered apologies she was too sedated to hear. "I am so sorry," I murmured again and again, the words dissolving into the sterile air. Morning filtered in, slowly pale and muted. I hadn't eaten, hadn't moved, hadn't done anything except breathe in small shredded pieces. A nurse came in with a clipboard and asked me routine questions, but I could barely focus. My brain was foggy numb, as if someone had wrapped my thoughts in cotton. "We'll need to talk about treatment options," she said gently. "There will be out-of-pocket costs depending on what insurance covers." My throat tightened. "What kind of costs?" I whispered. She hesitated. "It depends on the intervention she needs, but you should prepare for several thousand. Maybe more." The words hit me physically. I swallowed hard, nodding, even though everything inside me felt like it was collapsing inward. When she left, I pressed my forehead to the side of the bed and tried to breathe, but each inhale cut sharp like glass. I checked my phone again, even though I didn't want to. More cancellations, more hateful messages. Someone had posted a video analyzing my lies, pausing on the old photo of me standing on the track field, as if that single image erased years of surgeries, physical therapy, nerve damage, pain, and nights screaming into pillows because my legs wouldn't obey me anymore. I turned the phone off, then on again, then off. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I needed money. I needed help. I needed something, anything. But every time I tried to open my shop portal or think about reopening orders, my hands began shaking even harder. Around mid-morning, a doctor entered to explain my mother's condition. She experienced an acute cardiac event. The good news is she reached the hospital quickly, but she'll need ongoing care medication and monitoring. It is manageable, but it will be a long process. I nodded woodenly. "Can I take care of her at home?" "Eventually, yes," he said, "but not immediately. And you'll need support. Support. The one thing I had convinced myself I didn't deserve. I wheeled myself into the hallway to get air, though there was no real air in hospitals, just recycled ventilation and the faint scent of sanitizer. I stopped at the end of the corridor, staring at the linoleum floor until it blurred. My mind raced, panic rising in waves so high I felt dizzy. I couldn't do this alone. I knew that. But the person I needed most was the person I had been trying to push away. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because I was terrified he would offer me a kind of love I wasn't sure I could hold. I pulled out my phone again, not to check notifications, but to type out a message to Daniel. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know what to say. Sorry felt wrong. Help me felt desperate. I need you felt dangerous. Before I could choose, a voice spoke behind me. Emily. I froze. Slowly, I turned my chair. Daniel stood in the hallway holding a folder with the logo of his company's foundation on it. His suit jacket was draped over one arm, his hair slightly disheveled from moving quickly, and there was real worry in his eyes, the kind you can't fake. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. "I was dropping off paperwork for a partnership we have with the cardiac wing," he said, stepping closer. "One of the nurses mentioned seeing you. Is everything all right?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Tears pushed forward faster than my control could stop them. I covered my face with my hands. "It's my mom," I finally managed to choke out. She collapsed. "They say it was her heart. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to pay for anything, and my shop is falling apart. People think I lied. Everyone hates me. My mom is sick because of me. I can't do this. I can't." My voice cracked open and the words tumbled out like water from a broken dam. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it with hollow reassurances. He simply walked closer, knelt down beside my wheelchair so we were eye to eye, and waited until I lowered my hands. His voice was calm, steady, grounded in a way that made the panic inside me shift, even if only slightly. "You are not alone," he said quietly. "And you did not cause this. Stress does illness, does life does. But you didn't." I shook my head. "I can't pay for everything. I don't even know where to start." He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "We have hardship assistance programs through our foundation. They're meant for situations like this. Medical emergencies, financial strain, caregiving needs. It is not charity. It is what the program is for." "I don't want to be your responsibility," I whispered. Daniel rested one hand on the floor beside him, grounding himself before answering. "You're not my responsibility. You're someone I care about. There's a difference." His voice softened even more. "Let me help you apply. Let me walk with you through this. You do not have to do life alone." Something inside me cracked at those words. Not the painful crack from before, but something gentler. Something I had almost forgotten the feeling of. My mother stirred behind us, her voice faint but clear. "Listen to him," she whispered. I covered my mouth again as tears streamed down my cheeks. Daniel stood and gently placed his hand on my shoulder. He didn't squeeze. He didn't rush me. He simply stood there, steady and present, the way no one had been for me in a very long time. And for the first time that day, I felt my lungs fill fully. I was not alone. Not anymore. That night, after leaving the hospital with a stack of paperwork and a stomach twisted so tightly it hurt to breathe, I went home determined to be strong for at least a few more hours. I told myself I could do it, that I had to do it, that falling apart would only make things worse. So instead of sleeping, I wheeled straight into my tiny workspace, turned on every lamp, and told myself I would reopen Belle's shed, push through the panic, and restart sales so I could pay even a fraction of the upcoming medical bills. Candle jars lined the counter like little soldiers waiting for orders. Wax sat in large blocks beside oils and wicks and my broken heart. My hands were cold stiff, but I forced them to move. I melted wax, poured it, stirred it, wiped. Spills repeated, over and over, until the motions blurred into something robotic. I reached too far at one point and nearly slipped from my chair, catching myself just in time. My heart pounded wildly. Sweat pricked my neck. My vision pulsed in and out. I kept telling myself to keep working, keep pouring, keep pushing, but my body had already been screaming at me for days, and I ignored it because I was so afraid of what would happen if I stopped. And that was exactly when it happened. My hand trembled as I lifted a tray of freshly poured candles. A single twitch, a tiny, unsteady motion, and the entire metal tray slipped from my grasp. It hit the floor with a violent crash. Glass shattered everywhere, ricocheting off cabinets and baseboards. Wax splattered across the tile like pale paint. The sound echoed through the little apartment, painfully loud, final, in a way that made something inside me break. I froze. Then everything inside me shook loose all at once. I lowered my head and let my hands fall limply into my lap. My breath came in short, sharp bursts like my lungs had forgotten how to work. My vision blurred completely. I felt myself tipping forward, the room spinning. Tears spilled before I even realized I was crying. I bent forward until my forehead nearly touched my knees and my hands covered my face as soft sobs turned into jagged, uncontrolled sounds that didn't even feel like they were coming from me. It was like every cruel comment, every hateful message, every bill, every fear, every ache in my spine, every failure, every moment I tried to be strong for too long, all of it erupted at once. I can't do this. I choked out into the dark. I can't. I can't. I can't. I wasn't sure how long I cried. Minutes, hours. It all bled together. I only remember the knock at the door because it startled me out of my spiral. A soft, hesitant knock. I didn't answer. I couldn't. A few seconds passed, then another knock, gentler but more persistent this time. Emily Daniels' voice came through the door, low and careful, like he didn't want to frighten me. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. Another moment passed. Then I forced the quietest whisper barely audible. Doors unlocked. It took him less than a second to open it. I heard the soft click of the latch, his footsteps slowing as he took in the scene. He didn't speak. He didn't gasp. He didn't rush toward me like a hero in a movie. He simply entered the room with quiet, measured steps. When he reached the edge of the spilled wax and broken glass, he crouched down and began picking up each shard carefully one by one, placing them gently into a small cardboard box he found near the counter. He still hadn't said a word. My crying softened into hiccuping breaths as I watched him through blurred vision. He wiped the wax from the floor with an old towel he found hanging from a hook. He checked each broken jar for sharp edges before setting it aside. Then he walked to the sink, rinsed his hands, dried them, and finally turned to me. Only then did he kneel beside my wheelchair, close enough for me to feel his presence, but far enough to not overwhelm me. "Emily," he said softly, not asking a question, not demanding an explanation, just saying my name like it was something worth saying gently. That alone made my throat tighten again. My voice cracked. I dropped everything. I ruined it all. I can't keep up. I can't pay for my mom. Everyone hates me. I am failing in every direction. The words tumbled out in a broken mess. Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't correct me or try to convince me I was wrong. Instead, he reached for a clean cloth soaked in warm water, gently took my shaking hands and wrapped them carefully to warm them. He held them there, his hands covering mine, steady and grounding. "You didn't ruin anything," he said quietly. "You just had a moment, a human moment, and you're allowed to have those." I shook my head. I shouldn't be falling apart like this. His voice remained steady. "If you didn't fall apart after everything you've been carrying, that would worry me more." Something broke open again inside me, but differently this time. Not panic, not despair. Something softer. Something like relief. I looked at him through tears. "Why are you here?" A long pause. A breath. Then the simplest truth in the softest voice. "Because you don't have to go through this alone." My chest tightened, but not painfully. It felt almost like my lungs were remembering how to take in air. He didn't hug me. He didn't touch my face. He didn't play rescuer. He just stayed there on the floor beside me, keeping quiet company while my sobs slowly calmed into trembling breaths. For the next hour, we didn't speak. He just stayed. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, the pieces of me weren't scattered alone on a cold floor. Someone was there, not saving me, not fixing me, just staying. And it was enough, more than enough. In the days that followed that night on my kitchen floor, something shifted between us. Something I was almost too afraid to acknowledge out loud. Daniel checked in each morning with a short message. Just a simple good morning, or a photo of something he knew would make me smile, like a dog sticking its entire head into a pile of leaves or a crooked sunrise over the river. I replied sometimes and sometimes didn't, but he never pushed. He showed up without intruding, spoke without overwhelming, stayed without hovering. It should have made me feel secure, but instead a tiny fear began to curl inside my chest, quiet and sharp. Real closeness had always terrified me more than loneliness. I kept waiting for the day he would realize I was too much, too complicated, too fragile, too broken. And then the shift happened. It started small, like most changes do. One morning, he didn't send a photo. The next, only a short message saying he'd be busy at work because of a crisis at one of his company's branches. I understood. He was a CEO with a massive workload. But a hollow ache settled in me before I could talk myself out of it. The next day, he didn't text at all. The day after that, just a brief apology with no details. I told myself not to read into it. People had lives. Not everything revolved around me. But the fear didn't listen to reason. I felt myself slowly folding back into old patterns, into the belief that I was temporary in people's lives, something good to help for a moment, but not something someone stayed for. One night I tried calling him, then stopped before I hit the button. I didn't want to interrupt him. I didn't want to bother him. I didn't want to give him even one more reason to step away. I convinced myself he was tired of me, tired of the mess I always seemed to drag behind me. And just like that, the distance grew faster than I expected. My candle shop, which I had reopened in faint hope after his encouragement, sat dark and untouched. Wax cooled in Block's wicks, lay scattered shipping boxes piled near the door. I didn't announce anything. I simply shut it down again, closed the site tab on my laptop, and swallowed the same bitterness I had known for years. I spent more time in my room than anywhere else. My mother noticed immediately. She watched me the way only a mother can watch a daughter unraveling quietly with a mixture of fear and heartbreak. One evening, she stood at my doorway, arms crossed gently. "Sweetheart," she said, "why did you close Belle's shed again?" I shrugged, avoiding her eyes. "It's just not the right time." "Is it the shop?" she asked softly, "or is it something else?" Something inside me cracked slightly, but I shook my head. "I don't want to talk about it." She walked in and sat on the edge of my bed, her hands warm as she laid one over mine. "You're hurting." It wasn't a question. My lips trembled. "Mom, I don't fit into his world." Her eyes softened, turning heavy with the kind of understanding that comes from decades of surviving her own disappointments. "You're not pushing him away," she said gently. "You're pushing yourself down." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Her words hit too deep, cut too close to the truth I had been too afraid to name. After she left, I stared at my phone for nearly an hour, waiting for a message from Daniel that didn't come. By midnight, panic and shame tangled into something too heavy to hold. I opened our message thread. My fingers hovered above the keyboard as a cold numbness spread through my chest. I typed slowly, my hands shaking with every letter. "Thank you for everything. I'm okay now. You should live your life." I read it once, twice. Then I hit send. Immediately, my stomach twisted. I didn't want him to go, but I couldn't bear the thought of him staying only because he felt obligated. I couldn't handle being someone's burden again. Hours passed with no response. Days followed. No texts, no calls, nothing. It was exactly what I told him to do, and yet exactly what shattered me. By the fourth day, the silence felt like confirmation. I had been right. He finally saw me the way everyone eventually did. Too complicated, too much work. Someone to care about from a distance, but not someone to build with. Late one night, unable to sleep, I wheeled myself to the kitchen for water. The apartment was dark, the air thick with the quiet you can feel in your bones. My reflection in the window looked like a ghost of someone I used to be. I couldn't stop replaying every moment with him. The way he didn't flinch when he saw my panic attacks. The way he picked glass from the floor without a word. The way he kneeled beside me like my pain wasn't something to fear. And now he was gone. Not because he wanted to hurt me, but because I had pushed him out with my own fear dressed as strength. Something inside me cracked again, but this time it wasn't despair. It was realization. It was the uncomfortable truth that I had spent so long trying to avoid being abandoned that I had started abandoning myself first. I sat there, hands wrapped around a cold glass, my heart pulsing unevenly, and whispered into the empty room, "I'm not afraid he'll leave. I'm afraid he'll stay." The words hung there honest in a way that hurt. I closed my eyes and let the truth settle inside me like something shifting back into place after being crooked for too long. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Daniel would ever come back, but for the first time I understood the real enemy wasn't distance. It was fear. Fear of being loved. Fear of being chosen. Fear of being seen completely. I didn't know how to fix it yet, but I knew one thing: I didn't want fear making decisions for me anymore. 3 days after I sent that message telling Daniel to live his life without me, I woke up with that familiar heaviness in my chest, the kind that made it difficult to breathe, let alone move. My mother had already left early for one of her follow-up appointments, leaving a gentle note on the fridge telling me not to forget to eat. I ignored it like I ignored most things lately. The house felt unnervingly quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every little sound feel too sharp and too loud at the same time. I stayed in bed until nearly noon before finally dragging myself into the living room. I hadn't checked my mail in days, so when I opened the front door, I nearly tripped over the small brown parcel sitting neatly on the welcome mat. There was no label from a company, no printed barcodes, just my initials handwritten in dark ink. E.B. My heartbeat stuttered. Only one person wrote like that. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up and rolled back into the apartment. I set the box on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment, afraid to open it. Afraid to hope. Afraid that whatever was inside might hurt more than the silence. But even fear couldn't outlast curiosity forever. I took a slow breath and gently peeled the tape open. Inside was something I hadn't seen in months. Something I thought I lost in the chaos of everything that had gone wrong. My sketchbook. The soft gray cover was worn along the edges, smudged with old graphite fingerprints. I lifted it slowly, almost reverently. A folded note slipped out and floated to the floor. I picked it up with shaking hands. His writing was unmistakable. I kept this because I wanted to remember the girl who didn't let pain ruin her art. "If you ever forget her, I'll remind you. Jason." The words blurred as my vision flooded. I pressed the note to my chest, my breath breaking apart in little gasps. I didn't sob loudly. The tears just fell silently hot and steady, the way grief falls when it meets something painfully kind. I opened the sketchbook. Page after page of drawings stared back at me. My drawings. Soft portraits of people I met at the cafe. Small, still life sketches of my lavender plant. Ideas for candle labels. Rough digital logo drafts printed and taped in. I had almost forgotten this version of myself. The version who believed beauty could still be made even when life felt broken. My heart ached with longing for that girl, for who I used to be before fear wrapped itself around every choice I made. I closed the sketchbook slowly and rested my forehead against it, breathing shakily. When I finally lifted my head, my mother stood in the doorway of the hall watching me with quiet worry. I didn't hear her come in. She stepped closer, her eyes dropping to the sketchbook in my lap. "You used to draw every day," she said softly, "even when it hurt to hold the pencil." I swallowed hard. This was the only thing that made me feel like I wasn't disappearing. She cupped my cheeks gently, wiping the dampness beneath my eyes. "Then why did you let yourself disappear again?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I had too many. Fear of being hurt. Fear of being seen. Fear of needing someone. My mother sat beside me and held one of my hands with both of hers. "You don't have to be unbreakable," she said quietly. You just need to let someone hold the pieces when you fall apart." Her voice wavered for the briefest moment, and that nearly undid me. Strength doesn't mean standing alone, sweetheart. Sometimes it means letting someone stand with you. I broke again, head falling against her shoulder as more tears slipped out. Not from pain this time, but from the slow realization that all this time I had been fighting the wrong battle. I wasn't trying to protect myself from Daniel. I was trying to protect myself from the possibility that someone might truly care and that I might lose them. After a long while, when my breathing steadied, my mother brushed my hair back and whispered, "If you love him, go. Some chances don't come twice." The word love tightened something in my chest, but it didn't scare me the way it used to. Not anymore. I looked down at the note again, at the sketchbook in my hands. Daniel hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't abandoned me. He simply waited in the only way he could after I pushed him away. I took a deep breath and closed the notebook, my fingers lingering over the cover. For the first time since everything shattered, I felt clarity. I needed to see him. Not later, not tomorrow. Now. My mother squeezed my hand as if she could read my mind. "Go," she urged gently, "before fear talks you out of it again." I grabbed my bag, tucked the sketchbook safely inside, and wheeled toward the door. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. The sunlight outside was too bright, the air too warm for late autumn, but I barely noticed. I headed straight for Daniel's office building. The receptionist recognized me immediately, her eyes widening. "He isn't here," she said softly. "He's at the hospital. His mother was admitted yesterday." My breath caught. Without another word, I turned and made my way to the nearest rideshare pickup point. The 30-minute ride felt like an hour. Every passing streetlight made my heart beat harder. Fear whispered that I was too late. Hope whispered that I wasn't. When the hospital entrance finally slid open in front of me, I felt my pulse lodge in my throat. I navigated the hallways, slowly asking for directions to the cardiac wing. And then I saw him. Sitting beside a hospital bed, shoulders slumped, his face tired in a way I had never seen. His mother lay asleep, frail beneath the soft blanket. Jason had his head bowed slightly, one hand rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked exhausted, human, breakable. My breath trembled as my wheels moved forward, almost on instinct. Everything in me felt fragile, exposed. But I kept moving. As I rolled closer, he lifted his head. Our eyes met, and for a long second, neither of us moved. Everything we had done, everything we had broken, everything we had feared seemed to rise in the air between us like a question waiting for its answer. My voice came out barely louder than a whisper. "Jason," I said, my throat tight with emotion. "I'm here. Don't go." His expression shifted pain and relief, mixing in a way that made my heart ache. He stood slowly, like he couldn't quite believe I was real. Then he took one step toward me, then another, and suddenly we were inches apart. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply knelt beside my chair, wrapped his arms around me, and held me like someone who had been waiting to breathe. And I let myself be held. For the first time in years, I didn't pull away. I didn't apologize. I didn't shrink. I just let myself exist in someone's arms. And for the first time, it felt like home. The moment Jason wrapped his arms around me in that quiet hospital hallway, something inside me loosened, something that had been clenched so tightly for so many years that I barely recognized the feeling of release. His embrace wasn't desperate or dramatic. It was steady, warm grounding, and for a brief moment I let my forehead rest against his collarbone, breathing in the clean scent of his shirt, mixed with the faint smell of antiseptic drifting from the room behind him. When we finally pulled apart, he kept one hand on the armrest of my chair, as if making sure I didn't roll away by accident or instinct. "I didn't think you'd come," he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, threaded with exhaustion I hadn't noticed before. I swallowed hard. "I almost didn't," I admitted. "Fear is loud." His gaze softened in a way that made my chest tighten. "So is hope," he said. "But you listened anyway." I didn't trust myself to respond. Instead, I glanced through the doorway into the hospital room where his mother lay. The heart monitor hummed steadily beside her soft green pulses rising and falling like a lullaby. Her breathing was shallow but rhythmic, her silver hair brushed neatly to one side. There was a small vase of white carnations on the bedside table, their petals slightly wilted from the dry hospital air. Everything in the room felt fragile. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Since yesterday morning," he answered. "She collapsed at home. They're running more tests. The doctors think it's a complication from her last surgery." He pressed his fingers against the back of his neck, a gesture of quiet worry. "I didn't want to pull you back into my world just to watch me fall apart." The irony hit me strangely. "Jason," I whispered, "you held me together when I fell apart. Do you really think I'd leave you to do this alone?" His eyes closed briefly as if the words themselves reached into that part of him he tried so hard to keep steady. When he opened them again, there was a sheen of emotion he didn't bother hiding. "Come inside," he murmured. "She's sleeping, but she'd want to meet you." I hesitated only a second before wheeling myself forward. Inside the room, the air felt colder. Machines blinked quietly around her bed. Jason pulled a chair closer and sat beside me, our shoulders almost touching. "She's the strongest person I know," he whispered. "She raised me by herself, worked 2 jobs, pushed me through college. She never let anything stop her." His voice wavered. "Seeing her like this, it scares me more than anything." I looked at him, at the tightness in his jaw, the dark circles under his eyes, the way he kept tapping his thumb against his knee to keep himself steady. "You don't have to pretend you're invincible," I said softly. "Not with me." His gaze flicked to mine, sharp but grateful. "I'm trying," he said. "Trying to be someone who doesn't run when things get hard." A brittle laugh escaped me. "We both have a talent for running." Maybe he replied, "But you came here." Silence settled between us. Not heavy, not awkward, but warm and quietly honest. After a long moment, he reached for my hand. His fingers brushed mine tentatively at first, as if asking permission. When I didn't pull away, he laced our fingers together gently. "I didn't respond to your message," he said, voice low. "Not because I agreed with it, because I didn't know how to tell you that you were wrong without pushing you further." My throat tightened. "I thought I was doing you a favor," I whispered. "Letting you go. You weren't letting me go," he said. "You were letting fear win." His words cut through something inside me, but not in a painful way, in a clarifying one. He took a slow breath. "When you pushed me away, I thought maybe I expected too much from you. Maybe I didn't give you the space to breathe." "No," I interrupted quickly. "It wasn't you. It was everything that came before you, every person who left, every moment that taught me I wasn't worth staying for." His grip on my hand tightened, not enough to hurt, but enough to anchor me. "Then let me be the first to stay." The simplicity of the sentence unraveled me. Tears built in my eyes again, quiet and uncontrollable. He didn't look away. He didn't panic. He didn't try to soothe my crying with empty words. He just stayed still beside me, one thumb brushing the back of my hand in slow, steady circles. After a few minutes, I wiped my cheeks clumsily and asked, "Why did you send me the sketchbook?" He exhaled as though he'd been waiting for the question. "Because I knew you'd forgotten her. The woman who drew through pain, who created beauty even when she could barely lift her own hands. I didn't want to lose her. And I didn't want you to lose her either." My heart pressed painfully against my ribs. "I don't know if I'm that person anymore," I whispered. "Then we'll find her again," he said. "Together." The word together echoed in my chest. It felt terrifying. And right. A soft groan came from the bed. Jason and I turned at the same time. His mother shifted slightly, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at her son first, then at me. Jason stood and stepped closer to her bedside. "Mom," he said gently, "this is Lila." His mother studied me with tired but kind eyes. "You're the girl from the stories," she murmured. Jason flushed faintly. I might have mentioned her a few times. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You take care of my boy." My breath hitched. I nodded slowly. "We take care of each other?" I whispered. Jason looked at me, something warm and fragile and hopeful flickering behind his eyes. His mother's eyelids grew heavy again, and she drifted back into sleep. Jason sank back into his seat beside me, letting out a slow breath that sounded like a weight leaving his body. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, "for choosing to be here." I looked at the man who held me when I broke, who protected me when the world laughed, who waited when I didn't know how to stand on my own. "I'm tired of running," I whispered, "and I'm tired of hiding." His eyes softened. "Then stay." My fingers tightened around his. "I will," I said, voice trembling but certain. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since the accident, since the betrayal, since the viral cruelty tore through my life, I felt something steady settle in my chest. Not fear, not doubt, something like belonging, something like the beginning of a truth I was finally ready to face. I looked at Jason and he looked at me, and in that quiet hospital room where the world felt fragile and real, we finally met without defenses, without distance, without fear. Just two people choosing each other in the most human moment either of us had known. The day Jason chose a life with me did not begin with fanfare or sunshine or anything close to a fairy tale. It began with the gentle hum of my small workshop heater and the faint scent of lavender still lingering from the night before. After everything that had happened, I woke up expecting the same quiet routine, the same familiar tug of doubt pulling at the edges of my mind. But when I rolled into the workshop that morning, something felt different in the air, something softer, lighter, almost as though the world itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Orders had begun returning to Belle's shed, trickling in slowly but consistently. Not because of pity, not because of viral attention, but because people genuinely liked what I made. I could see it in their messages, their words sincere and warm, telling me how my candles made their homes feel peaceful. It was still overwhelming, still fragile, but it was real enough to give me something steady to lean on. Jason had helped me rebuild the website over the past few weeks, staying with me through long evenings of product photos, shipping labels, inventory mistakes, and the countless times my hands shook too much to tie the twine neatly around a jar. He never rushed me. He never took over. He simply worked beside me, offering help only when I asked and stepping back when I needed space. It was the kind of partnership I had never known before, one where I was not carried or ignored, but met exactly where I stood, or rather, where I sat. That morning he arrived with coffee in hand, stepping into my workspace like he had always belonged there. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly rumpled, the faintest trace of exhaustion still clinging to his eyes. But he smiled when he saw me, a smile that reached all the way into something inside me I didn't know was waiting. "Morning," he said, setting the coffee beside me. "Thought you might need this." "You read my mind," I murmured. He shrugged, teasing. "It's not difficult. You forget to eat and you forget to sleep, so caffeine is my backup plan." I laughed softly, and for a moment everything felt almost normal. Then his expression shifted a little, a seriousness settling behind his eyes. "We need to talk," he said gently. Those 4 words had never brought anything but panic into my life before. They had always been the beginning of the end, the warning before someone walked away. But with him, they didn't feel like that. They felt like a door opening instead of closing. Still, my pulse quickened and I swallowed. "About what?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved around the table, taking a seat beside me, not across from me, like he used to. Our knees almost touched. He rested his elbows on his thighs, hands clasped loosely as he searched for the right words. "These past weeks," he began quietly, "I've been thinking about what it means to show up for someone. Not just when they're doing well. Not just when things are calm. But when everything falls apart." His voice steadied, and I realized something important. I don't want to be the man who fixes things for you. I don't want to be someone who swoops in and saves the day. That's not love. That's ego. I blinked, startled by the honesty of it. He continued, "I want to be the man who builds with you, not above you, not behind you, with you." Something warm, almost painful, blossomed in my chest. He looked down at his hands for a moment before lifting his gaze to mine again. "Lila," he said softly, "I want to build a life with you. Not because I pity you, not because I feel responsible for you, but because every time you let me into your world, every time you trust me enough to stay, I feel like I'm becoming the person I've always wanted to be. My breath caught. Jason, I whispered, voice trembling. I'm not whole. His eyes softened instantly, and he shook his head slowly. Wholeness isn't the admission ticket to being loved. His voice deepened with sincerity. And if you think I'm whole, you're giving me more credit than I deserve. I have cracks too, Lila. Different ones, but they're there. Tears stung my eyes before I could stop them. I'm scared, I admitted. Terrified. Me too, he said. But fear isn't a sign we shouldn't do this. It's a sign it matters. He reached out then, not abruptly, not with urgency, but with an open hand resting between us. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. A choice. And for once, I didn't hesitate. I placed my hand in his. The moment our fingers laced together, something shifted inside me, something deep and trembling and long denied. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a grand romantic explosion. It was something quieter, steadier, more profound. Like finding a place to rest after years of wandering. Jason exhaled softly, almost in relief, and brought our joined hands to his chest. Whatever this becomes, he said gently, we do it slowly, carefully. Honestly. My heart thudded. Together I whispered. He smiled, a small, warm curve of his lips. Together he repeated. And for the first time in years, the word didn't scare me. The rest of the day unfolded with a new softness between us. We worked side by side, not speaking much, but not needing to. Every movement felt different, grounded in something deeper than routine. Later, as sunlight filtered into the workshop in golden streaks, Jason brushed his knuckles lightly against my shoulder and whispered, You know, today was important, right? I nodded. Yes, I breathed. It was the first day I didn't feel like I had to earn a place in someone's life. He leaned closer, his voice warm. You never had to earn mine. My eyes closed briefly, letting the truth of that settle inside me. And when I opened them again, Jason was looking at me with a tenderness that made it impossible to pretend anymore. This wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. This wasn't temporary. This was a beginning, and I was finally ready to believe in it. The quiet life we built together did not arrive all at once wrapped in celebration, or marked by some dramatic turning point. It grew slowly like the soft glow of a candle, warming the corner of a dim room almost unnoticed, until one day I looked around and realized the darkness was no longer the thing filling the space. The first sign of our new rhythm came on a calm morning when sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the gentle swirl of steam rising from the kettle Jason had just set on the stove. He moved around the kitchen as if he already belonged there. Humming softly, the sleeves of his shirt rolled up his hair, still slightly mussed from sleep. My mother sat at the small round table flipping through the newspaper, her glasses slipping down her nose, muttering commentary under her breath, the way she always did when she thought no one was paying attention. I sat nearby at the counter, assembling a batch of candles, the familiar motions grounding me. It was a simple morning, the kind that would have once slipped past without meaning, but now it felt like proof that healing was possible in small, steady breaths. Jason poured tea into my mother's mug before she even asked, then set a cup beside me, always remembering how I liked mine with just a touch of honey. This wasn't grand romance. This was presence. This was partnership. This was love taking shape in the quiet corners of everyday life. For weeks we lived in that gentle routine. I worked on Belle's shed orders in the mornings while Jason managed his remote meetings from my dining table, occasionally muting himself to mouth something funny at me when he caught me staring too long at a crooked wick. My mother would chime in with unsolicited advice about both wax temperatures and relationships, claiming expertise in both despite clear evidence otherwise. Evenings were slow and unhurried. Sometimes Jason cooked, sometimes I supervised while he tried not to burn anything. Sometimes we ordered takeout and sat on the floor eating from boxes like teenagers. Every night before bed, he would refill my water bottle plug in my phone and brush his hand lightly along my shoulder, as if reminding me without needing words that he was here, really here, and not planning to disappear. We didn't set timelines. We didn't rush intimacy. We didn't perform closeness for anyone. We simply allowed ourselves to exist together a little more each day. The world outside moved fast, but inside our small home, time was something we shaped gently, carefully. And it was in that softness that Belle's shed blossomed into something bigger than either of us had expected. Orders grew. My online course, Candlelight for Quiet Souls, reached people across the country, and I found myself teaching veterans teenagers healing from surgeries, widows rebuilding their strength, and single mothers carving out a piece of peace for themselves. They told me my voice made them feel less alone. I didn't know how to tell them that teaching them made me feel the same way. Jason handled the business logistics I once feared. He created systems, organized shipments, tracked inventory, and somehow managed to do it without making me feel replaced or overshadowed. He would sit beside me during the evening rush, sorting packaging tape and labels, occasionally looking up to say something like, "You have no idea how many people you're helping," in that soft, earnest tone that always made my throat tighten. One afternoon, an invitation arrived from a well-known lifestyle podcast. They wanted to interview me about my journey, my shop, and my course. Jason encouraged me gently but firmly, telling me I had a voice people needed to hear. I agreed, heart-pounding but determined. On the day of the interview, he set up the camera and microphone, adjusted the lighting, and then took a quiet seat just off frame, giving me a small, encouraging nod every time our eyes met. When the interviewer asked how I found the courage to rebuild my life after everything that had happened, I didn't sugarcoat anything. I said carefully, I did not overcome everything. I just learned how to live with it and to let myself be happy, even if not everything is fixed. My voice trembled. Even if I am not whole in the way people expect, I'm still me. And that's enough. The interviewer sat silent for a beat, then nodded slowly. The episode went viral not because of drama, but because of truth. When I shut off the camera, Jason came over and rested his hand behind my shoulder, his forehead gently pressing to the side of my head. "You did it," he whispered. I breathed out shakily. We did it. That evening we sat in my backyard as twilight settled around us, the fire pit crackling softly, the scent of lavender drifting through the open window behind us. Jason sipped tea from one of the mismatched mugs my mother insisted we keep despite their chipped edges. I watched the flames flicker and felt the weight of the world finally resting in a place that felt livable. Do you ever think I asked quietly that none of this should have happened, that I shouldn't have been put through all of that pain, all of that cruelty? He didn't answer immediately. He stared into the fire, thoughtful. I think he said slowly that the world breaks people in different ways. And sometimes, if they're lucky, they meet someone who knows how to sit with them in the cracks. I felt my throat close up. "You didn't fix me," I whispered. "I wouldn't want to," he replied softly. "I just want to stay." A quiet breeze passed between us, lifting a few strands of my hair. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the idea of the future. I didn't brace myself for disappointment or loss. I simply breathed, letting myself believe in the peace forming around us. This wasn't the life I once imagined. It wasn't the life I fought for or planned for. It was better because it was real, imperfect, shared. And when Jason reached for my hand under the soft light of the fire, lacing his fingers with mine, as though it was the most natural thing in the world, I finally understood that healing wasn't about returning to who I used to be. It was about choosing who I wanted to be now. A woman who could love. A woman who could be loved. A woman who didn't need to stand to be strong. I looked at him, my voice steady and calm. "This was never a story about a wheelchair," I said. "It was a story about being seen." His thumb brushed the back of my hand. "And choosing to stay," he added quietly. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by candlelight and warmth, and the man who never once turned away, I realized I had finally come home. When you reach the end of a story like this, something quiet happens inside you. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is something deeper, a kind of stillness that feels like your own heart finally exhaling. Maybe you saw a part of yourself in my journey. Maybe you recognized the weight of being judged too quickly or misunderstood too easily or discarded by people who once claimed to care. Maybe you know what it feels like to be used as a joke, to have your pain turned into entertainment for someone else's 5 seconds of attention. If you do, then this story was for you, because healing does not happen in perfect arcs. It is slow, uneven. Some days you rise, some days you fall back into old shadows. But then, if you are lucky, someone steps into your life not to fix you, not to rescue you, not to tell you to be stronger, but simply to stay. And when someone stays, really stays, you begin to remember that you were never unworthy. You were never a burden. You were never the punchline. You were always a whole human being who deserved gentleness. Maybe that is why stories like this matter, because they remind us that kindness is powerful, that presence is powerful, that the simple act of someone choosing not to walk away can rewrite everything you thought you knew about yourself. Jason did not heal my life. He simply refused to leave me alone in it. And sometimes that is enough for a person to stand again, even if standing only means lifting your head and breathing without pain. So, if you are listening right now, if you are sitting somewhere with your hands folded in your lap, or a mug cooling beside you, if you are carrying memories that still bruise when touched, I want you to hear this. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to have someone meet you exactly where you are and say, without hesitation, I am here. And maybe you do not have a Jason in your life yet. Maybe the world has been unkind. Maybe people have disappointed you more times than you want to admit. But stories like this are not promises. They are invitations. Invitations to hope again a little at a time. Invitations to believe that somewhere out there someone is trying their best to be gentle with the world, and one day that gentleness might reach you too. And if this story touched something in you, even the smallest spark, then stay. Stay with us. This channel was made for people who have lived enough life to know that happiness does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it arrives slowly, step by step through the cracks of a heart that thought it had nothing left to give. Here, we honor the quiet stories, the healing stories, the stories where ordinary people find extraordinary courage not by being perfect, but by being real. And if you want to walk with us through more journeys like this, journeys of resilience and heartbreak and tenderness and second chances, then I hope you will subscribe. Not because numbers matter, but because you matter. Because we want to keep telling stories that lift the weight off your shoulders, even just for a few minutes. Stories that remind you that you are not alone on the road you are walking. Stories that speak in the language of the heart, the one that does not age, the one that still remembers what it felt like to hope for more. And if today's story helped you breathe a little easier, or softened something inside you, or made you feel seen in ways you did not expect, then let this be the moment you choose to stay. Hit the subscribe button, press the like so this story finds someone else who needs it. Share it with one person who might be struggling quietly, because sometimes the smallest act of connection becomes the beginning of someone's healing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. And wherever you are tonight, I hope you feel the gentle truth that carried me all the way through this journey. You are worthy of being chosen. You are worthy of being loved, and your story is not over yet.